Viktor Frankl said, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms. To choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson. Stay tuned for the next hour as Sue explores the human psyche, what makes us tick, and how to live better, more fulfilled and more meaningful lives. Only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. My guest today is Jodi Samuels. She's in Jerusalem, and I'm going to get back to Jodi in a minute, but first I'd like to dedicate this program to Ronnie Frankl, Yitzhak Ben Moshe, beloved father of Karen, Leanne, and Donna, and a much-loved grandfather, Papa. Now, our topic today, Jodi, is Be the Change. Now, I want to just introduce you first. I have your book in front of me, and you have got unbelievable passion for so many things, but I'll read it from what's there. From Johannesburg to Jerusalem with a stopover in Manhattan, Jodi Samuels' mission is to change the world, one small, unique step at a time. As an entrepreneur, international speaker, special needs advocate, and supermom, on any given day you may find Jodi starting a new business, organizing a community event, or conducting an interview with the Wall Street Journal while riding a camel in Morocco. But if you're one of the thousands who've attended her events, you may be surprised to learn that Jodi was once petrified to take the stage. And there you are, she became the change that she wanted to be. In this honest, it's a very insightful memoir. I have it in front of me, and it's called Chutzpah, Wisdom and Wine, The Journey of an Unstoppable Woman. It's amazing, and if you want to buy it after you've heard Jodi, please get it on Amazon. We're going to give details of Jodi out at the end of the program. But Jodi, welcome. And your book, what I have read so far, is fantastic. I'm really enjoying it. I am laughing and I'm crying, and it's bringing out so many emotions. So welcome on High FM.
Thank you, Sue.
How are you today?
Yep, good. It's a good morning in Jerusalem, a quiet one.
Oh, good. Jodi, you were from South Africa initially, and you decided, you went to Manhattan, you went to Israel, then Manhattan. You've been all over. I think you said, I was listening to a YouTube of yours from Dr. Les Glassman, and thank you, Les, for sending it to me and sending Jodi's contact number to me. And you said you'd visited 90 countries. Is that right?
Yeah. Since that YouTube, I think I'm in about 96 countries.
What is it that you enjoy about traveling?
Okay. So firstly, I love adventure. I love the unknown. I'm a real sociologist at heart, and I really love understanding people, places, cultures. I love nature. I've got like a restless spirit in me, so I always want to see more and explore. But I find that the more that I travel and the more that I see, I have like an unquenchable thirst wanting to see more, because I feel like the world is such a big place. And even when you go to countries, there's just more to see and more to explore and more depth to get and more people to meet.
And your husband, does he feel the same about traveling as you do?
I think he sometimes feels like life is a little bit of a high-speed car chase being married to me. But thank God he does really love traveling. I think he would maybe take life a little slower, but he really does appreciate traveling, and my kids as well.
Now, Jodi, your mom was Mrs. Newman, who actually taught my daughter Caroline at the yeshiva. So I'm sure there are quite a lot of people listening in who knew your mom. How did your mom feel about you going to Israel?
So, I mean, my journey started long before when I went to Israel. I think my parents, although my mother taught at yeshiva college, she was not part of the religious staff. And I think my parents were very, very freaked out when I started my Jewish journey. And, you know, they had every like stereotype in their mind that we'd be like these poor people, and we have like dirty children and kidnapped by a cult. And this was before people had really, the big Bolshevik movement in South Africa.
Right.
And my parents were very freaked out.
So take a step back for a moment. What actually took you onto that first step, or who took you onto that first step?
I think there were two things that took me on the step. One was my grandfather randomly decided he was sending us to summer camp, and the only camp he could get us into was Beitar. So it wasn't like a ideological decision at the time. I went to Beitar camp, and I went every summer thereafter from the time I was about 10. And I think that really drove the Israel Zionist ideology into me. But when I was in Standard 9, year 11, I guess you call it now, I went to Eden College, and there were a lot of Yeshiva College kids then who also went. And on the bus, on the way home from school one Friday afternoon, a cute guy said, "So, will I see you at shul tonight?" And I was like, "Cute guy, shul." And that was the beginning of my Jewish journey. And I met these religious kids. Although I grew up in the heart of Glen Hazel, we were the family that we'd get in our car on Shabbat morning, and all my mother's students would walk past, and they would go like, "Good Shabbos, Mrs. Newman." And I'd be like, "The God Squad, the Yami Army." That was like never going to be part of their world ever. And, when I started hanging out with these kids, and I went to their homes for Shabbat meals, and I was like, wow, there's something there. And from that, I started going Rabbi Tats, like Kiva Tats at the time was having Shiurim, and I started going to that. And I made the decision I wanted to go to Israel for my year after high school. My parents weren't so into the idea. In those days, kids didn't go to Israel unless they were like more religious families going. And finally convinced my parents to let me go. And that was very much the beginning of my journey. The Gulf War broke out after I'd been in Israel. I'm aging myself here.
The Gulf War?
Yeah, broke out after I'd been in Israel about 2 months. And I landed up going to London on the last plane out of Israel at my parents' insistence. And I didn't really have anywhere to stay. And my mother mentioned it in the staff room at Yeshiva College, that her daughter was stuck in London. And one of the staff members said, "My in-laws live in London. I'm sure they'd be willing to host her." And I arrived at this Holocaust survivor couple's home, Rabbi Mordechai Fachler. Many people would know him. He was the principal of Yeshiva College. It was his parents. And they became my adopted grandparents and mentors, and helped me go on this journey, which and gave me a lot of inspiration for the things that I do these days.
How amazing. Now, going back to the things that you do, your inspiration, you've run businesses, you've helped businesses to develop, you are an entrepreneur as well, and if people want to know more about you, they can actually go onto LinkedIn, and you're quite amazing. What I find very interesting is that you used to be terrified of speaking, of talking out. Was that from childhood that you actually were shy in front of crowds, or was it a shyness, or what was it?
Yeah, I think if you would have asked my parents, there was never, in every parent-teacher conference, they were like, "Jodi never speaks, Jodi never talks." And I think even when I was at university, I did an MBA, and I've met people since my MBA who are absolutely astounded that I am such a public speaker and advocate and run events, and really, in fact, one of my websites and my brand is Jodi's Voice, really about using my voice to effect change. And people are very stunned when they meet me, and I really believe that it was my daughter was a big part of that.
And we're going to get back to that shortly.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. And my guest today is Jodi Samuels, and Jodi is in Jerusalem. And Jodi, you were telling me about, well, first of all, London, if there are a few noises coming through, don't worry about it. They are building next door, unfortunately. But Jodi, you are an unstoppable person. You are fiercely independent. You've started many businesses. You're also a fierce advocate for the disability community. Would you mind telling me how this happened?
So I think that for me, the most momentous moment in my entire life was when the doctor walked in when my third daughter was born, February 25th, 2008. And he said, "Mrs. Samuels, did you do genetic testing?" And he then raised the suspicion. I knew what he was going to say. I sat bolt upright. I had this mom's internal, feeling that something was wrong. And I sat upright, knew something was wrong. And he raised the suspicion of Down syndrome. And I actually knew what Down syndrome was. I have a first cousin with Down syndrome, and I had this absolute terror and fear. I was one of those people who found it hard to look at people with Down syndrome when I saw them in the community. And I really had this moment of absolute fear. I was like, what's it going to mean for me as an entrepreneur, as a hostess, as a world traveler? And I think for me, the real moment was I went into the restroom, and I was just looked in the mirror, and it was the only place I could be alone with my thoughts. And I had to have this honest conversation with me, because sometimes we don't have these honest conversations. And I had to ask myself, what kind of mom do I want to be? What kind of wife? What kind of legacy do I want to leave for my children? And even though I was freaking out about not making it yet to the front page of a business newspaper or magazine, and I had all these wild ambitions, I just had this moment of clarity. And I remembered Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, and he had the saying that we begin to achieve greatness when we pass on our values to the next generation.
That's beautiful.
And I walked out of there, and I just had this clarity of who I was going to be and what kind of mother and what kind of position. And I was very fortunate. I shared my vision with my husband, and he was on the same page as me. But we also soon realized that, if we were going to change the world, it was going to be us who were going to change the world. If we didn't like what we saw out there, it was going to be us who was going to make that change. We were going to be the change that we wanted to see, or at least for my daughter. And there was just so many things that happened right in the beginning. And we walked out of that hospital, and they check your bracelet to make sure you're not stealing the baby. And my husband joked that they should just brand activist on our foreheads. And he didn't realize how prophetic those words were when on my daughter's 4th day of life, a neighbor walked in, a religious neighbor walked into our apartment to come visit. And she was like, "What? You didn't do an amniocentesis and abort?" And I was like, "Well, I'm holding the baby, so I guess not." And we soon realized, people just said the most stupid things. And by age 2, we were defending her right to exist more than once.
Aww.
And we were defending her right to exist in a modern Orthodox Jewish world where she wasn't Harvard perfect, so please don't apply. And we were locked out of schools, and we were locked out of community. And it was devastating for me as a Baal Tshuva who had chosen my path. And I realized that there were so many families who were in our situation. And there were other families who had been locked out, but didn't have the maybe strength or the fearlessness to stand up. And I started organizing these community forums. My first community forum in New York, there's nothing. Through my events I had big media contacts, and I posted this everywhere. And you arrived at the event, and there was just, if anybody's ever lived in New York City, whenever there's a news event, these news vans all arrive, and their lights are flashing. And I arrived at my own event, and I couldn't believe the media circus that was there, because they love stories about Jews. And some of the media all wanted to interview me. I had a panel. I wasn't going to speak. I was just going to introduce the panel. And they all wanted to interview me. And I remember saying to my husband, "Okay, you speak." He's like, "Hey, you wanted to do this, you speak." And I joke that was my lights, camera, action moment. But it really was that moment where, when they say in Pirkei Avot, in Ethics of the Father, when there's no man, be the man. When there's no leader, be the leader. And that was my moment when I had to be the man. I had to be the person who was going to stand up and use my voice. And ever since then, with the help of wine, hence the name Chutzpah, wisdom and wine, with the help of wine sometimes, especially in the beginning, I really started using my voice because I felt that I had something to say and nobody was going to hear it if I wasn't going to use my voice. And that was when I just forced myself. I say a little bit like Elton John. When he's on stage, they say he's shy outside, but when he's on stage, he performs. And that certainly was me in the old days.
Wow, that must have taken unbelievable courage. But you know, Rabbi Daniel Aguilar said, with every breath you take, Hashem is whispering, my world cannot go on without you. Is that what you felt with your daughter?
You know, I really believe, firstly, I had 2 miscarriages. I'd had 2 miscarriages between Kayla, my youngest, the one with Down syndrome, and my other daughter. And I really, really believed that this is the neshama God wanted me to have. This is the soul. So, and I had like just such clarity of that. And I think that really helped me. And it helped me that I didn't know that my daughter had a diagnosis of Down syndrome until she was born. I had done testing and they said, I didn't do an amniocentesis, but I'd done a triple screen and they said there was like very low risk. I wasn't in like a high maternal age risk. And I think that I just had this like opportunity to bond with her for a few days before I found out. And I just had this absolute clarity that this child was meant to be. The day she was born was the day God wanted her to be in the world. So I think that just gave me, when you have clarity and you understand your why and you understand from an inside, it's much easier to focus on the outside to do your activism or to believe. So yes, I agree with Rabbi Daniel's statement.
You know that I was, as you're talking, I was thinking about Rabbi Tanzer at the yeshiva. If you remember, the children, well, not all children, but the people from Selwyn Siegel used to come over to the shul, and he would stand up as they came in. He was a great advocate as well for children and adults with disabilities. And I've never forgotten that, funny enough. And when you say that you were afraid of your one cousin who had Down syndrome, I remember one of my children also saying that she, didn't know how to actually handle all these Down syndrome children coming in. And because they were so affectionate, they would come up and hug everybody in the shul, which was beautiful. But you had to actually get used to that as well. And people are not used to disabilities, are they?
So, I certainly think that to be born in 2008, like Kayla was certainly better than to be born in the 70s or 80s. The world's come a long way. But yeah, people aren't used to it. And I understood that because I had my own personal and very visceral experiences with that. And I wanted to change the narrative. I wanted to shift people's perspectives about this issue. And I have always spoken freely about my daughter, and I've always been very honest about the good, the bad, the ugly, the challenges, the stresses as a mom. And I feel that when you are authentic about it, people really appreciate. And I'm very clear in my advocacy that I think we've gone a long way from people not knowing how to deal with people with special needs to a lot of money being thrown to the special needs community, a lot of high-fiving, a lot of coming a long way in breaking barriers. But we haven't yet, good is not good enough. We haven't yet reached the top of the mountain. We've come a long way, but I think that we haven't yet reached the stage that we understand that people can be different and still equal, different and contribute, different and meaningful to society. We still treat people with disabilities often as chesed projects. So yes, we don't ignore them, we're not awkward, but high-fiving isn't meaningful friendship. High-fiving someone isn't real opening your heart, opening your schools, your shuls, your community centers. And one of my next books that I'm working on is like the audacity of inclusion, like real inclusion, taking it to the next stage, not just being okay with where we are now. And as a Jewish community, we've thrown a huge amount of resources all around the world, plus we have laws that facilitate inclusion. And we now need to pick up the game to the next stage where we truly truly celebrate diversity.
So you're hoping that people listening in today might add their voices to yours. Is that a hope?
I would encourage everybody to add their voices, and I'm more than happy to speak to communities. I'm more than happy to run workshops, and I'm more than happy to speak to people about my personal experience, because that experience of being locked out, and I have a daughter who's extremely high functioning with Down syndrome, and she'll say to me, Ima, Mommy, you know how I know the person doesn't like me? And she'll say, and she gives me a fake smile, and she said, because they give me a fake smile. You don't want a fake smile. Why should she? Or she'll say, Ima, people are nice to me, but they're not my friends. I want that child one day to be able to say, people are my friends. I want people one day to look at her and treat her. So some people have blonde hair, and some people have brown hair, and some people have blue eyes, and some people have green eyes, instead of like fake smiles.
Oh, that's so sad, isn't it? But Kayla's got her own voice as well. Tell me about Kaylee's voice. How did that come about?
So initially, Kaylee's voice was me advocating for Kayla. And as she reached, teenage years, I helped Kayla write Kaylee's World posts. But it's a reflection of Kayla and her feelings and the way she sees the world. Sometimes much more simply than you or I would see it, but it's still real, and it's real for her, and it comes with joys and pains and hopes and expectations and wishes, and I want people to see her not as a project of her mom, but as her own person.
And how would people access that?
So she has a Facebook and Instagram page, Kaylee's World, and I do the advocacy in that on Jodi's Voice. So there's a dual-pronged approach.
How fantastic. What has the response been to her Facebook page?
Yeah, I mean, people appreciate her and people love her, and people know Kayla in Jerusalem. We call her the mayor of Jerusalem because she's very social and very friendly. But I do see that, as I've expressed, they say little kids, little problems, big kids, big problems. And, when we've gone from the stage of being cute to being a teenager with much harder challenges, I see that people don't know how to react. They either give her high fives, fake smiles, or empathy, or, you're so cute. And she doesn't want to be cute. Her dog's cute. At age 16, she doesn't want to be cute. She wants to be respected and valued. So, I think that part of it's just education. People are very keen to give superficial, oh, we love Kayla, we adore Kayla, she's so cute. But I think it's important for Kayla and for people to move to the next stage of that relationship with her, because she is a teenager with real wants and needs. She hopes to get married. She talks about boys.
Isn't that
she
lovely?
Has her big dreams just like anyone else. And maybe her dreams will be manifest slightly differently, but that doesn't make them lesser dreams just because they're different.
Absolutely. If anyone would like to contact us, please do so on 34519, or you can telegram us on 061 895 1019. Now, Jodi, I am totally fascinated about how you host thousands of people in your home on Shabbat. And people, you say, you're very into inclusion. Well, you host different groups. I heard about the Chinese group, and you were moving into a new apartment. Please just tell us that story, because I loved it. I heard it on Les's YouTube.
So we host an organization called Shabbat of a Lifetime, and they bring different groups from around the world who come, and you have an opportunity to do Hasbara, Israel advocacy. Sometimes they're Jewish groups, sometimes they're not. To give you an idea, when my daughter had a school interview to get into like this really tough high school to get into, they asked her which character from the Bible would she want to be. And she said, Sarah. And you felt like there was a little sigh, like, couldn't she come up with someone more like unique? Everybody says Sarah. So they said, why would you want to be Sarah? And she said, well, 1 week, she was 11 at the time, but she said, because I want to be like my parents. 1 week they host like Swedish pastors. The next week they host East German politicians on a fact-finding mission. The next week they host evangelical Christians. Then they host Chinese businessmen. And the week after they host young professional singles Jews looking to get married. And the person was like, oh, okay, that's a good reason to want to be Sarah. But we've hosted some fascinating groups, and the Chinese group were one of my regular groups, and I was moving into a new apartment, and it wasn't going to be ready because they were painting and renovating. And I convinced them that, no, I have to send them to another family. But this guy always brought his groups to me, and he was very, very adamant, only me. So I sent him photos, and I showed him that we had like all the plastic and everything with paint, and we didn't have furniture. Everything was in storage. And we just had like some folding tables and chairs, and I didn't even have like a fridge in the house yet. And he's like, no problem, we'll come anyway. Anyway, it was quite crazy.
You couldn't get out of that one.
That one. They were adamant they would come any which way. So with full disclaimer, we allowed them to come. And this was our first Shabbat in this new apartment. And about 5 minutes before candle lighting, I heard pop. And the electricity went, the fuse went.
I thought it was only South Africa that happens.
So the fuse went. To be honest, there were 2 electric boxes in the house, and we didn't know there was a second one that we could. So I couldn't find, this is Jerusalem, 5 minutes.
Go, just finish 5 minutes before
Before Shabbat, and I couldn't get a
We're going to get back to that in a moment.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
This is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. And my guest today is Jodi Samuels, very fascinating, dynamic woman who does the most amazing things and changes people's lives. So our topic is Be the Change. And she certainly is. Now, Jodi, you were telling me about the Chinese group that were coming to you. You had just moved into your apartment and you heard pop because they decided they were coming anyway, even though you had no fridge, no furniture. You had fold-up tables and chairs. And just before you heard pop, and then what happened?
So there was no time. All we had time to do basically was light some tea light candles. And if anybody's ever bought tea light candles in Israel, they don't last very long. And I met the group outside, and they have an interpreter who explains everything to them and translates. And I explained the situation. And I explained that we have thousands of years of Jewish heritage, and we just don't have another option when the Sabbath is in Jerusalem and everyone's keeping the Sabbath. And fortunately, it was a Chinese group who respect heritage and tradition. And they all clapped and said, no problem. And they came up. And at some point when the tea lights all went out, they put their iPhone flashlights on. And we had dinner by iPhone light. And it was a very fascinating meal that had very interesting conversations that came out of it.
A lot of wine? Was a lot of wine served?
There's always a lot of wine. And when you have Chinese, when you tell them about the concept of l'chaim, they all do it, and they all have to clink glasses with everyone. Drink enough wine and you solve lots of problems in life.
And now, normally you have between 50 and 60 people on a Friday night. Do you have a team that works with you?
So I'm famous for teaching a Shabbat, how to make a 4-course Shabbat meal in 45 minutes.
Oh, wow.
So I can really cook quickly. I do have a cleaning lady, a Zerat helper who comes to help me. And she is amazing at helping with prep and everything. But really, I have a very good husband and very good kids who all help, because the food is actually not such a hard part. I find the cleaning up, the setting up, the shopping, That's really a lot of the challenge, and it's real teamwork from the whole Samuels family. And we have it down to a very smooth operation. So much so, like even when I have guests, I don't have help. And I'm there and we serve and we make it all happen and it looks pretty seamless. It's quite hectic behind the scenes.
I'm sure.
But it's pretty seamless when we're serving. I think nobody would ever know how hectic it is.
Now, how do people actually know that you are hosting? Do they phone you or do they book
so
or what?
There's different ways. I mean, I run an organization for young professional singles called Jewish International Connection. And that's in New York and Miami, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and we run different programs. In fact, this week, the Shabbat is Yom Yerushalayim, the Shabbat of Yom Yerushalayim, and we celebrate the reunification of Jerusalem, and I always do a big Shabbat program. So people hear about it, it's on Facebook groups, and it's advertised, and that's one way. The second is through this organization, Shabbat of a Lifetime. They often ask us to host groups through my shul, my synagogue, and word of mouth, like people just know. I mean, one of the unique groups I had was American soldiers based in Jordan.
Yeah.
And one of the soldiers is an Orthodox guy who had studied in yeshiva after high school. And he called a guy that he studied with and said, I really want to bring a mission of soldiers from the U.S. like an official mission to Israel, because he felt they were based in Jordan and only hearing one side of the story. And he got permission that they would go to Yad Vashem and to the Old City and to Jaffa and to Nazareth and really do a proper trip. But he wanted them to have an authentic Shabbat experience. So he called my friend and he said, do you know anyone who would host 50 American soldiers based in Jordan? And he said, yes. So, we get to host very unusual groups through these experiences.
And do you, afterwards, do you find that you're in contact with quite a few of them? Do they want to keep contact with you?
Yes. My daughter, Kayla, is my PR agent. She makes sure everybody walks out with a business card. And I have been very, very touched, especially with my evangelical Christian guests, how incredibly how much they reached out after October 7th, where sometimes the silence of my Jewish friends was a little deafening. There was so many people reaching out to us and praying for us. And my daughter, who's in the army right now, jokes about the head of one of the biggest evangelical churches in America, the lead pastor. They were in our house, and these churches are huge churches. So he has 50,000 members, they have many churches under him. And he reaches out to my daughter constantly to check she's safe and pray for her. And she's like, Emma, you would think I'm personally responsible for the safety of all Israel for the amount of prayers I get from this congregation. So, yes, we absolutely do. And people have reached out to us from Jewish groups we've hosted. People have asked us if we can host they had such a good experience. They said, we're coming for my daughter's bat mitzvah or my son's bar mitzvah. Would you be willing to host my whole family for a Shabbat meal? So, yeah, we absolutely keep in touch with people. And I appreciate it. I appreciate that we have friends from all around the world with different perspectives, that we can build bridges, take down barriers, and have meaningful conversations. We don't have to be the same religion, we don't have to agree, but we can make friends with people who have, different worldviews.
Absolutely. And wonderful to bring up your children like that. That David Attenborough said, how could I look my grandchildren in the eye and say I knew what was happening to the world and did nothing? And you certainly have decided that you will change the world as much as you can. A message did come through on my phone, actually, saying, please ask Jodi about the war, the Israel-Gaza war. How does she feel the Israelis are coping?
So I will tell you that I was here on October 7th, and the absolute fear and terror that we felt on October 7th. And you woke up on the morning of October 8th, and we didn't know if there were terrorists roaming the streets of Jerusalem. We all thought that it's possible that Arab villages uprise and people come flowing in from every neighborhood. Your neighbors left, anybody, the Americans and the French and the British who don't live permanently sort of disappeared and the streets went quiet. And on one side, you looked at people and everybody was like literally sitting a collective shiver. We had absolute terror. And already on October 8th, you saw this incredible resilience start stepping in, and people went into action mode. And they didn't wait for their municipality, their government, their shul leader. People just saw things that needed to be done. And the entire country turned into one productive chesed machine, one productive kindness machine. And I think that is one way that Israelis cope. One of their ways of having resilience is by doing and making the world better. Instead of feeling like we are the victims, we will make this happen. And I think Israelis also have an incredible sense of purpose. Every kid learns about Tanakh. Kids go on these Poland trips. People understand they have a purpose. I said this long before October 7th, long before we even moved to Israel. Israelis feel like they have part of it. They don't just feel like they're a cog in a wheel. They feel that they have a role in this nation. And the kids are brought up to believe that, and the whole education system and the youth groups. And that came into play. And this resilient society, the society that the kids grow up with missiles and with uncertainty and with knowing that tomorrow could change, these kids, people have this very clear focus, purpose, and know that we have no choice but to survive.
We'll get back to that. Wonderful.
This is Finding Human with Sue Jackson, only on 101.9 High FM.
Hello, this is Sue Jackson on the Finding Human program on 101.9 High FM. My guest today has been Jodi Samuels. The time is going very quickly. Just wanted to give you a few details about Jodi. You can follow her on Instagram, www.instagram.com/Jodi's Voice. JODIS voice, one word, and then / Or you can follow her on Facebook, www.facebook.com/Jodi Samuels voice, one word. And if you would like to buy her book, Chutzpah, Wisdom and Wine, you can do so on Amazon. It's not in other bookshops at the moment here yet. Tomorrow, Jodi, we are going to vote and be the change. I am so fed up with everyone telling me how dreadful South Africa is. We have a country worth fighting for. We really do. Our country is wonderful. Our people are incredibly friendly. Yesterday, I was at one of the hospitals with my husband, and he's in a sling at the moment. And one of the helpers at the hospital came past and said, Madala, which is a respectful term, Zulu term of old man, because he was looking very exhausted. And he said, you will be strong. He said, Israel is strong. And he said, that you must realize that your ribs are strong, your bones are going to heal. He thought it was something to do with the bones. And he said, and watch, Israel will win.
Yeah.
So, and that is South Africa. People do stop, they say hello, they expect you to greet them back. And I would like to say to everyone listening in, please, all the South Africans, please go to the voting stations tomorrow and cast your vote. And let's see the difference we can make. Be the change. Nelson Mandela said, we can change the world and make it a better place. It is in your hands to make a difference. And that is what Jodi's been saying. Jodi, what wisdom can you share, more wisdom, before we end?
I absolutely believe that each one of us has the power to change our own corner of the world. We can't necessarily change the whole world, but we can all change our own corner of the world. We can all be an influencer, an advocate for change. And people think that they can't make the change, but whether you're a work colleague, a leader of a sports team, a parent, a therapist, a rabbinic leader, every one of us at some point in our lives has the ability to influence other people. And if we understand who we are and you understand your why you do something, who you are, your inner values, what you stand for, when you truly understand that, you will feel empowered and you will feel the passion to make a change in whatever part of the world that you feel, whether it's in my world, it's with Israel, or with, young professionals, singles, bringing them closer to Judaism, or it's with helping use my voice for raising advocacy awareness. I know what I believe and I can make that change. I can be an influence. I can be an example. And I truly believe that everybody in the world and every South African has that ability to influence, and everybody has that ability not only to be the change, but to influence others to be the change, to excite, to empower, to inspire others to take on the mantle of being part of that change.
Wonderful. And on that note, we're going to have to end, but I would just like to end with something Elie Wiesel said, actually. He said, religion is not man's relationship to God. It is man's relationship to man. And I think you have really highlighted that today on the way you have connected with people and your inclusion of everybody. Everybody is welcome in your home, to your children, to your family. It's wonderful what you're doing. Thank you so much, Jodi, for being on my program. There's a lot more to discuss. Can we do another program sometime soon?
Absolutely, and thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Jodi. Craig's telling me to wrap up. Thank you, Craig, for keeping us on air. Bye.